The history of sausage around the world is absolutely fascinating, and it's greatly influenced by culture, ingredients, economic position, immigrants, just to name a few. And I've always wondered what it would look like if a South African moved to Italy and allowed the Italian culture of salami making to influence South Africa's #1 meat snack, biltong. So in today's episode, we're going to see exactly what that looks like as we make the first ever Italian-inspired biltong salami. Let's do it.
We're going to begin by making a spice crust for this biltong salami. A little peppercorn and some coriander seed. Once the coriander seed starts to take on a little bit of color, it'll look like it's popping and will smell very aromatic, very floral. Anyway, that's when it's done. Pull it off the heat. Put it in your mortar and pestle. At the last minute, I wanted to add a little heat to the spice crust, so we are adding red chili flakes. I don't want it to be too overwhelming. After all, we're not making chili bites, we're making biltong salami. As we grind this in our mortar and pestle, you can grind this as fine or as coarse as you want. I think a more coarse grind will be better and it'll stand out a little bit more. So I'm pretty happy with what we've got here. Not a problem. Okay, now let's make the glue. The recipe for the glue will be in the description box below, but basically we're going to be adding water, vinegar, and a little corn syrup. That's what that is right there. And then we're going to take the rest of our water and add it to some cornstarch or some potato starch. And we're going to create a bit of a slurry. So by the time it's done, you should have 2 small bowls, one with a slurry and then the other with your water, vinegar, and corn syrup. Bring the water, vinegar, and corn syrup mixture to a gentle boil. Turn the heat down, and as soon as it gets to this stage, you can now add your slurry. Grab a whisk, because this next step happens kind of quick. Whisk everything, and you will begin to notice it thicken up. Your edible glue is officially done. Be sure to let it cool before you use it, and if you find that your glue is a little thick and difficult to work with, you can always add a little bit of water at a time until you get it to the consistency that you like. All right, this will keep, by the way, in the refrigerator for quite a while. We are just going to put a couple spoonfuls into that casing, and all I'm looking for is a very thin coating. So we're just going to use a rolling pin and just kind of squeeze out the excess. You don't want too much of that glue inside. When we open it up, you can see that it is super sticky. That's exactly what we're looking for. And I'm going to take this spice mixture and just slowly open up that casing. This part can get a little tricky. Some people have suggested, maybe if you have like compressed air, trying to open up the casing with compressed air, that might make it a little bit easier. I haven't tried that. But if you are patient and you add a little bit of spice at a time, as the spice coats that wall, it will be easier to open. And there we go. There is the inside of our casing. Looks absolutely incredible. You can use it immediately. You can let it dry. I actually made this the day before we made the salami. So by the time I used it, it was dry. And now we need to look at our protein. This is going to be 100% beef. The top side and the silver side are popular cuts of meat when making biltong. Those are also known as the top round and bottom round. If you're in Latin America, you could use the pulpa negra or the palomilla. But when you're making a salami like this, it doesn't really matter because the meat's going to be ground up anyway. When it comes to the fat, you do want to use hard fat. If you can get yellow fat, even better. That's got more flavor. The bottom round has a nice little fat cap you can use. That's great fat. Also, the tri-tip has great fat. And this is what our beef and fat looks like. I think in this particular recipe, we used about 20%. I did end up making a second version where we used 30% fat, and I really like that. So in the recipe link, I'm going to say, hey, you need 30% fat. It was absolutely brilliant. This salami will be fermented in the style of your Italian salamis. We are going to be using a starter culture called SM194. It has 4 different types of bacteria and a yeast that's going to develop amazing color, amazing aroma, and incredible flavor. So I am just going to add a tiny bit of that starter culture to some distilled water. And the recipe link that I will have for you in the description box below will tell you exactly how much of everything you need to add so that you can literally duplicate the sausage that we're making here in this video if you want to. All right, we're going to give it a swirl. Let it sit at room temperature for about 30 minutes. That's going to rehydrate that starter culture, wake it up so that by the time we use it, those little bacteria are going to be moving and shaking. Let's look at our spices. We got a little salt. We also have black pepper and some cure number 2. I'm also adding toasted coriander that we ground into a powder. Absolutely amazing boost of flavor we're going to get from this right here. You know me, I got to have a little chili flake in there, and then we're going to add some brown sugar, dark brown sugar. Let's not forget about the dextrose. This is going to feed the starter culture. And then we're going to add a binder. That is potato starch. This last ingredient is totally optional, but if you do use it, you will find that it will improve the texture of your salami. Our meat is partially frozen. Looks absolutely beautiful. We're going to grind this on a 6mm plate in our number 12 grinder from the sausage maker. Beautiful looking grind. Very pleased with that. Remember, this is 20% fat. The other version did have 30%, so the marbling is going to be a little more pronounced in version 2, which you'll see at the end of this video. Let's get everything mixed up. We're going to start by adding our starter culture. Let that incorporate for just a few seconds. There we go. Starter culture is in. Once you have it mixed, and really it doesn't need to be all that very long, we're going to add a little Worcestershire sauce. Once again, the recipe will have all the exact measurements. And now we're going to add our spices. And no matter how you choose to mix your meat, make sure that it's properly chilled. You want it under 34 degrees Fahrenheit when the mixing stage begins, because it's very easy to heat up the meat, smear the fat, and then ruin your salami. With a KitchenAid, the entire mixing process only took about 75 seconds, no more than 90 seconds. If you're going to be mixing it by hand, it's definitely going to take a little bit longer, but the end result should be the same. You want a very sticky farce, something that'll stick to the underside of your hand when you grab a little handful and turn your hand upside down. And it looks like we are there. So we need to get our Biltong salami meat into the sausage casing. And at this point, it smells incredible. I mean, I am definitely picking up those Biltong vibes right about now. We're using a small sausage stuffer. And if you're going to get into making salami, you definitely need to invest into a sausage stuffer. It doesn't really matter the size. This is the most economical one that the sausage maker carries, and it's perfectly adequate for what we're doing. Having a dedicated sausage stuffer will literally increase the quality of not only your sausage, but also your salami. There's our spice crust. As I said earlier, we made it yesterday, and it is very dry. I don't think it's going to be a problem, though, so we're just going to put it onto the horn, kind of get a little accordion thing going, and then as tightly as we can, we're going to pack that meat into it. And this is where the techniques between sausage making and salami making start to differ. Up until now, basically the entire process has been the same for both, but when it comes to stuffing a salami, you want to really pack it in there. And that's just going to keep you from having other problems, later on down the road. Okay, so we're just about done with this casing. We're making roughly a kilo. And hey, comment in the comment section below if you have a stuffing horn cleaner from the sausage maker. Makes cleanup super easy. We're going to take the plunger that's sized appropriately for that stuffing horn and push all that meat out. So easy. Looks like the size of this casing, so I want to say this is a 24-inch casing, could have used about another 250 grams of meat. And so if we would have made, a 1,250 gram batch, we'd have filled this casing all the way up. No problem, but this is what we're working with. All right, I'm very pleased with the spice crust on the inside. It looks great. Tied off nice. We need to get the weight of this sausage. That's how we will know when it's ready. Our scale reads 1,029 grams, so that's what we're going to write. That's the A, that's actual weight. And we're going to target a 35% weight loss. That's the target weight, 668. So once our salami reaches 668 grams, it's ready to eat. If you want a more firm or a more dry Biltong salami, you can target a 40% weight loss. That would be totally acceptable. Shoot, you could even do 45%, depending on how dry you want it. And we now need to ferment our sausage. So I took a little bit of that mincemeat. This was actually left over in the hopper. And we're going to wrap that in cling film. This is going to ferment alongside of our Biltong salami. And what we're going to do is test the pH of that little sample piece in about 24 hours or so, give or take. We don't want to disturb or puncture the larger salami because you could potentially be introducing bad bacteria to it, and you definitely don't want to do that. During the next 24 hours, the starter culture that we added is going to be consuming the dextrose in the recipe. Through that process, it releases lactic acid, which lowers the pH of our salami. This pH drop is going to bring a tremendous amount of flavor, and it's also going to keep our salami safe while it's drying. Let's give our salami a prick, looking for any air pockets, but I don't see any. But you definitely want to give your sausage an overall prick. Now, at this point, we need to talk about mold. Do you want mold on this biltong or not? That's really the only two questions. I did not want mold on our biltong, and so we're not going to be applying a mold culture, but I don't want any mold on it. And if you don't do anything, natural molds will grow as well. So you either have the option to wipe it down with vinegar every so often, or you could do what I did and just very lightly smoke it. Smoke is a natural mold inhibitor, and so if we smoke our salami, it's not only going to add a really neat accented flavor, but it's also going to keep mold from growing. All of this is going to be happening while we're fermenting our salami, so we need to keep the humidity high. I've got a little pan of water with a paper towel in it, and the towel's edges are draped over the side. That's going to help wick moisture into the smoker, keeping the humidity at 85-90%. Notice there's the two versions of our Biltong salami, one with a spice crust, and then the one on the right does not have a spice crust. So we're going to see if there's a huge difference in flavor. We are going to be cold smoking this, so under 90 degrees Fahrenheit. And in order to ferment properly, this starter culture that we added, SM194, needs to be in an area that's between 75F and really 85F, You can go up to 90 if you want. There's our little sample piece, and we have our salami. And this is going to cold smoke and ferment at the same time. Depending on how smoky you want, you could let this go for 6, 7 hours, even 12 hours. But I didn't want it to be overly smoky, so I only smoked mine for about 3 to 4 hours. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to cold smoke our salami for 3 to 4 hours at the beginning stages of fermentation, right? So you just finished making it. It's now in your cold smoker. Keep the smoking temp under 85 Fahrenheit or 29.4 Celsius and try to maintain a high humidity, 90% or greater. After you're done smoking, you are going to wrap the salami in cling film and then place it in a warm area. Continue fermenting until your target pH is achieved. The ideal temperature range for fermenting is 75 Fahrenheit to 85 Fahrenheit or 23.8 to 29.4 Celsius. And we're going to be targeting a 4.9 to 5.1 pH. A total of 18 hours have passed since we started the fermentation process, and we're now going to check the pH. I do think that this is fermenting a little bit faster than normal because we did add that brown sugar, and that may be feeding the starter culture as well. So it is better to check sooner rather than later. I'm loving the texture. It's very firm, very well bound together. It's kind of glossy, smells amazing. We're using an Apera Instruments pH meter. Very simple pH meter to use and a great device if you're going to be getting into salami making. I'll put a link in the description box below if you need to grab one for yourself. And it looks like our pH is 4.88, so we just slightly missed our target. I should have checked it a little bit sooner, maybe even added a little less dextrose, but it's not that big a deal. We can now begin the drying process. So we're going to be putting this into the sausage maker's dry curing cabinet. This cabinet regulates the temperature and the humidity, and it's a perfect place to hang your charcuterie projects. And I want you to take a notice as to what's going on right now with our Biltong salami. Notice that the casing is starting to separate a little bit from the meat. If the casing separates from the salami, it's not the end of the world, but just be aware that in certain circumstances, mold can grow when there's oxygen present. In this case, I don't think we'll have a problem. So let's close the chamber down. Look at the specifics. We're going to let this dry in a cool place. So I'm putting it in a dry curing chamber. But if you have a basement or a cellar, those are adequate as well. The average temperature needs to be around 55 Fahrenheit or 13 Celsius. And the average humidity needs to be around 80%. Really 75 to 80% works. For this salami, we're going to be targeting a 35 to 40% weight loss. At the end of the day, this is really more about personal preference. So if you slice into it at 35% and you want to let it dry a little bit longer, you can certainly put it back in your chamber, no problem. A couple of months have passed, so roughly 60 days, and it seems that the casing has completely separated from the salami. Notice I've got a couple little mold spots on it as well. This is a project we're working on called All Roads Lead to Rome. Huge salami. And hopefully it'll be done by the time this show airs. Can't wait to share that project with you. That one is very cool. Okay, let's take a look at the Biltong salami. I'm hoping we don't have mold on the inside. We're about to find out. And that white mold on the outside was just carryover Penicillium nalgiavense from the other salami. So it's beneficial mold anyway. I'm loving the way it feels. Just before we cut into it, when I gave it a little squeeze, it felt very uniformly dried, very encouraging. And I like to check the tips. It's not that big a deal, but sometimes these tips can dry a little funny depending on the salami and where it was hanging. But it looks like this dried perfectly. I am very pleased with the way this looks. Okay, so far so good. Our Biltong salami is definitely moving in the right direction. This was the part that was left over in the casing. Oh, it smells good. Wow, that smells really good. Okay, now obviously our casing is going to come off super easy. And what I'm noticing is some of that edible glue stuck behind. And I guess I really wasn't sure what to expect when it came with that edible glue. I think I might have put it on too thick to begin with, but it does peel off pretty easy. And after doing this for about 5 minutes or so, I thought, you know what? There's got to be a better way because this edible glue is going to take forever to remove. And so I ran the salami under some warm water for just 10 seconds. And with a stiff bristle brush, was able to brush the salami, and this is what the end result looked like. So that was a much more efficient way to remove that glue from the salami, and if you're having the same problem, I would highly recommend it. But look at the spices. None of the spices brushed off, which I was kind of afraid of. This is the brush that I used, and literally just rubbed the whole thing down. That glue came off without any issues, but the spices are literally embedded into the meat, and so I am very happy with the way this looks right now. Let's do a side-by-side. Remember, we did make two versions of this. This is the exact same recipe. The only difference is that one has a spice crust and the other one does not. And actually, the one that does not have a spice crust has 30% fat, and the one that does have a spice crust has 20% fat. So I guess there is a little bit of a difference. Quick little slice. See what the inside looks like. Oh, wow. That is picture perfect. That dried beautifully. No problems whatsoever. Let's go ahead and slice the spice crust version. See what that looks like. Wow, same thing. These dried perfectly in the sausage maker's dry curing cabinet. And I will admit, the cabinet does come with a hefty price tag, but if you're into making salami and you want a professional cabinet to dry your salami, it's the best and most reliable one on the market. All right, let's get this salami sliced. So right off the bat, I'm loving the way they came out. They dried beautifully. But if I had to be totally honest, the one on the left, the one that doesn't have the spice crust, that slice looks amazing. That extra 10% fat really makes it pop. I bet it's not only going to give us a beautiful mouthfeel, but great flavor as well. So I think the recipe is going to stick with that 30%. Right there we have traditional biltong in the back. We're going to definitely take a little bite of that. But if we look at the salami, we've got a beautiful bind. No problem with either one of those. Nice. All that's left to do is to give it a taste.
Our Italian-inspired South African biltong salami is finished, and it looks incredible. I am very pleased with the way this turned out. Check that out. Beautiful marbling. It smells exactly like biltong. And for those of you that don't know, biltong is my #1 favorite dried meat on the planet. If you've never made it or if you've never had really good biltong, check out our video recipe on how to make biltong. It is incredibly easy. It doesn't take very long, 4 or 5 days, and the end result is just spectacular. We're going to try some of that here in a minute and compare it to what the flavors are like with the salami. And I love the idea of incorporating the traditional South African biltong into a salami because you really get to control certain elements that you aren't necessarily able to control with regular biltong. For starters, we can control the fat, and I think that's a huge bonus. Fat is flavor, and we definitely packed some extra fat inside of our biltong salami. Unfortunately, where I live, the cows that are slaughtered for meat production are slaughtered very young, and they're 100% grass-fed. So they're incredibly lean. It's very difficult for me to get my hands on a well-marbled piece of beef, meat from an older cow that's got beautiful yellow fat. That's very difficult where I live. So to be able to add extra fat to the recipe is going to give us a ton of flavor that we normally wouldn't be able to get if I were to just go to the store and buy, you know, the silver side or something like that. All right, what I think I want to do is try a piece of biltong first and then compare it to our salami. So let me just cut a little slice off of this right here. This would be considered relatively dry. Going in. Amazing. Chewy, tender on the inside, wonderful flavor. That fat finishes it off beautifully, nice and creamy. I wish there were more of it, and I think that's where our salami is going to come in. Check this out. We've got the version that does not have the spice crust on it. Remember, we did 2 versions. We're going to try the one without the spice crust first. I do want to say that my bind was incredible. 100% beef salami. Beautiful texture right here. Dried even from outside to center. Going in. That's not bad. It's not quite biltong. Although it did use the same elements, we fermented it to a decent acidity. I'm not quite picking up that biltong vibe. It is a delicious salami, don't get me wrong. For it being an all-beef salami, and I'm not a huge fan of all-beef salami, this is quite tasty, actually. All right, let's try the one with the spice crust. Check it out. Beautiful looking salami. Nice marbling and great bind on that. I love that. Okay. Here we go. There it is. That's what it was missing. It was missing that spice crust, that punch of pepper and coriander right there at the very end. And in my case, we have a little red chili flake, and so it's bringing this really nice low-level heat, but that coriander pepper combination really takes this salami to the next level. Between the one without the pepper crust, and the one with the pepper crust, I would say this one more closely resembles traditional biltong. Obviously, it's a little different because the entire chew is very tender. It's not quite like biltong where it's going to be a little bit tougher on the outside, a little bit more tender on the inside. This is going to be tender throughout, but it's absolutely delicious. And if you're into making salami, definitely worth a shot. This one's not bad either. If you were just going to say, I'm going to make a beef salami with the spices that we use, and this would be a delicious salami. It's just, for me, it doesn't really scream biltong like this one does. Absolutely amazing. I hope you get a chance to make it. Thanks a lot for watching. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. And if you would like to make this salami, check the description box. I'll put a recipe link, and it has all the details, the specific measurements and the quantities, and the entire process. If you get a chance to make it, let me know what you think. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed today's content. And if you're new to this channel and you enjoy sausage making, the craft of charcuterie, you've come to the right place, because this month we're uploading a brand new sausage making recipe every day through the month of October. You're not going to want to miss a single episode. I'm going to put a playlist at the very end of this video, probably somewhere around here. You can start back from the beginning and get caught up. Thanks a lot for being a part of Celebrate Sausage. We'll see you tomorrow. Same time, same place. Bye-bye. That's freaking delicious.